Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. It's Father's Day, Sunday night, June 16th, I believe, 2019. We're here together every Sunday night for 2 hours to talk about things that have been going on while I was out doing other things and you were probably working and paying attention to the rest of your life. This week and today, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who, by the way, is a former CIA director and was first in his class at West Point, has gone on to confirm that the intelligence sources here and in the Middle East have been telling the truth, that the attacks on the tankers in the Gulf of Oman were the direct work of the Iranian military. Apparently there's no doubt, no uncertainty, no maybe. The mullahs ordered it. So what does that mean? What are they doing? Well, in the world of international affairs, they're testing us. They apparently recall Lenin's maxim, probe with the bayonet. When you come to steal, stop. When you come to mush, proceed. They're no doubt betting that our ultra-liberal Democrats in Congress, who, if this happens, will most likely side with the Iranians, will be successful in muting our response. If so, they may not yet have gauged the strategic mettle of President Trump or the will of the Americans who support him. The reality here is that no sane person wants a military conflict anywhere. Only a lunatic would act purposely to bring one on. But once vital U.S. interests are threatened, and they certainly are here, and lives are at stake, if we are able to keep the nation secure and prosperous, we have a duty to meet the threat and to do whatever is necessary to neutralize it. The argument, of course, is we would be starting a conflict. But the reality would be that's already happened. Now, in the real world, only decisive action has any hope of putting the mullahs back in their box and avoiding a general war. Think about what President Obama would do, and then do the opposite. We'll come back to this subject in a little different way later on in the program. I read recently about 18 Washington County high school football players who walked into a feeding trough filled with water from a garden hose as a pastor baptized them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. All of this was captured on camera by staff members at Chatham Baptist Church, this according to Fox News. The problem is that they did this on a football field, a public school football field. These guys presumably were part of the football team. One person in their small town complained to the Atheist Freedom from Religion Foundation, and as a result, that group is now demanding an investigation about these religious activities. At Fox News, the report explained how that the Freedom from Religion Foundation's complaint was that high school football coaches were doing illegal activities. People. This happened in Alabama. How far do you think it's going to go? Now, it's obviously a deliberate poke in the eye to all the God haters out there. I would say it's not a very smart move on the part of these school teachers, coaches participating. And the atheists certainly didn't disappoint, although it seems that only one person complained. In their defense, if more atheists had known, they would have complained too. The term atheists will be challenged. But what else can you call someone who doesn't want God displayed in the public forum and is willing to do whatever's necessary to stop it? Speaking of stopping, stop the presses. Former President and presidential hopeful Joe Biden made a promise on Tuesday that he was going to cure cancer if he defeats President Trump in 2020 and becomes our president. Now, the obvious question is how, and what's he going to do? But then there's a question about which ones. There's not just one cancer out there. I went online, I counted 32. And those are just the major cancers. There's a lot of subdivision here. There are over 200 types of known cancers, divided further by severity, stages, and the cells which are affected by the cancer. And if history is any indication, there will be more. A president cannot guarantee that he will cure cancer. But then that doesn't matter. We live in a world where all you have to do is say it, and somebody will believe you. Former Vice President Joe Biden also admitted that most of the 2020 Democrats are on the same page when it comes to socialism. Why? Well, because while Biden has been leading in most polls, his closest competitor, Senator Bernie Sanders, registered socialist, has been narrowing his margins. Sanders is catching up to the front runner, to the golden boy, to the adult in the room that's going to save the world. This tells you what Democrats believe. They are socialists. CNN Jake Tapper took to Twitter recently to defend his question to Democrat presidential candidates about how effective their proposed gun control policies would or could be. Apparently on Friday night's Real Time with Bill Maher, Tapper's line of questioning was criticized by New York Times columnist Charles Blow, claiming that it was a horrible question. Tapper said because what we're doing is picking out one incident out of 30,000 deaths per year and saying, how could you solve this one thing? Blow said in response to Tapper's question, that's not the objective of gun control. The objective of gun control is to reduce the capacity to kill people who should not be killed. However, Tapper responded to the criticism by saying that he asked a question on how the candidates' plans would work. I asked which proposed gun laws might actually have had an impact on preventing a gun violence tragedy, and to that question came only the proverbial crickets. Logic and practicality apparently have no place in the liberal system. Only fear, irrationality, and propaganda. Recently, our United States Supreme Court passed on a case without comment. We're talking about a case which disputes the inclusion of our national motto, "In God We Trust," on coins and currency. They let it slide. The highest court in the land rejected hearing the case from a group of atheists represented by activist Michael Newdow that posed the constitutional question of whether or not the inclusion of the motto on currency violates the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Now, according to this group, the situation perpetrates perpetuates and exacerbates the political disenfranchisement of atheists who Newdow claimed were the nation's most politically disenfranchised protected class. Now, terms and phrases like this didn't exist 30, 40 years ago. For those of you under the age of 60, the Establishment Clause makes it illegal for Congress to establish a national religion. This case, this complaint, was asserting just that. Newdow claimed in the suit that mandating the inscription of facially religious text on every coin and currency bill made those who choose not to practice a religion political outsiders on the basis of their fundamental religious tenet. To that I would say, amen. The United States is not fascist. The United States is not any of these other kinds of religious or political things. In the lower court, the ruling against this case said the motto on currency comports with early understandings of the Establishment Clause and did not coerce people into practicing a religion. And the national motto itself has appeared on all U.S. currency. That's paper money for you public school educated graduates, and coins since 1955. In addition, it was first used on coins in 1864. But these people are never going to stop. And if history is any indication of the future, they will keep trying until they win. But they will not win on legal grounds. They will win on emotional grounds. Americans will continue to be educated largely by our public system and influenced strongly by our media until a preponderance of them will accept this idea, and they will insist that this phrase be removed. Despite fallacious statistics promoting as fact the percentage of homosexuals and lesbians have not exploded in number. If you read the news, you would believe that 60, 70, 80% of Americans are either homosexual or they support the homosexual movement. But according to a Gallup poll, only 3.8% of the adult population identified as lesbian, homosexual, bisexual, or transgender. Now that was in the first 4 months of 2015. Americans, according to Gallup, greatly overestimate percentage of gay lesbians in the United States. So why the wall-to-wall media coverage and the intense sympathy for these people? People who engage in sexual behavior which is destructive to their own bodily tissues and comes with the risk of a deadly disease. The answer might be in the fact that these people are just plain stupid, but they're not. The number of people accepting this perversion as natural and normal has exploded. The number of people committed to making this behavior normal goes well beyond the people who are actually engaged in the behavior. And the number of so-called Christians who either accept it or tolerate it as something people can't help, who are sympathizing with these people, aren't helping. Frank Newport, in the reference Gallup article, wrote, whereas 38% of Americans said homosexual and lesbian relations were morally acceptable in 2002, that number has risen to 63% today. And while 35% of Americans favored legalized same-sex marriage in 1999, 60% favor it today. This is nothing short of the power of the press. Oh, and the moral weakness of American society. And our children are at dire risk. This is not just an alternative behavior. This is a physically, emotionally, spiritually, morally destructive behavior. The people who engage in this are on a downward trajectory in terms of morality, in terms of their physicality. It is not a positive thing. But it's popular. From a news outlet called Bitter Winter, the headline said, "It can't happen here." Most churches in one major Chinese city, the city of Wuhan, have government-mandated surveillance cameras that allow the communist government to monitor the congregation's every move. These are churches in the Protestant Three Self patriotic movement. For example, a Three Self congregation now has 28 high-definition surveillance cameras, including 6 above the podium and 4 at the entrance. In one district of one city, 155 of the 170 Three Self churches have government-mandated cameras that are connected to a network allowing the government to watch these Christians in real time. The city's population is 4.7 million. A member of one church told Bitter Winter people that the Religious Affairs Bureau pressured us into installing them. They said each surveillance camera is connected to the public security organs as required by the Religious Affairs Bureau. They can see every move in church. And if we did not follow their demands, the church would have to be shut down. The cameras are part of a massive network of cameras across China that allow the government to monitor its citizens. There are an estimated 176 million surveillance cameras across China. The Atlantic is reporting that numbers could reach 450 million by 2020. China's persecution of illegal house churches is well documented, but its surveillance of these Three Self churches, I assume that is a reference to the triunity that we exist in. The surveillance is legal, but it does face severe restrictions. That fact has not received a whole lot of attention. But the question is, can it happen here? That's a question that ought to keep you awake at night. But if you want to answer the question, just keep the violence coming. Watch it as it explodes on your TV and on your internet outlets. Let the antisocial, prejudicial resistance to bisexuality or homosexuality, or just about any antisocial philosophy you can think of, become the political norm. And don't be surprised if the cameras don't start showing up in just about every public arena to monitor and to control for this philosophy. Here in the land of the free and the home of the brave, one worldism, social engineering, or just public opinion is driving the bus. Right now, about 30% of our population is dominating about 70% of our news. Most Americans are not part of the mainstream reactionary movement. But you'd never know that if all you did was watch the news on television. or listen to it on radio. According to the Washington Free Beacon, New York Democrat Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, in making her pro-abortion case during an interview with the Des Moines Register, drew a comparison between the pro-life stance and racism. That's right. To be pro-life is now racist. She said, quote, "I think there's some issues that have such moral clarity that we have a society decided that the other side is not acceptable. Imagine saying that it's okay to appoint a judge who is racist or anti-Semitic or homophobic. Asking someone to appoint someone who takes away basic human rights of any group of people in America." She said, "I don't think that those are political issues anymore." She went on to compare this with the doctrine of separation of church and state, wherein judges and others impose their faith on Americans, contrary to the Constitution. She asserts that there's no moral equivalency when it comes to racism, and consequently the same applies to women's reproductive freedom. Now, I want you to note how she equates cutting up babies in the womb with reproduction. Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of difference in her thinking. She also goes on to emphasize the so-called fairness inherent in linking the personhood of an unborn child to racism or anti-Semitism. Therefore, a natural equivalency when it comes to changing laws that deny women reproductive freedom. Her point is the separation of church and state, suggesting that we should not be imposing our faith on other people. She said we treat our pets better than this. And she concludes with, it's against our Constitution and it's against our Christian faith. See how easily politicians, liberals, atheists of all sorts can begin to evaluate what is and what is not Christian faith. The Christian faith honors children, unborn or not. She doesn't get it. But that's America at the end of the age on June 16th, 2019.